All right, so I wanted to talk about how to set up the simple web transport. Unlike the other transport layers, there is additional work that you need to do outside of Unity in order to get this to get set up properly. I wanted to make a video dedicated to this because of how complicated it was in order to get this to work. So I've done some things to help hopefully make your life a little bit easier by preparing a couple of Dockers to help you along the way. I wanted to show you some of the settings here. So I'm using port 7778. That is the default port. I am enabling SSL and WSS. For the SSL protocols, this really just depends on the website that you're going to be using. So be sure to select the one that works best for you. Normally TLS version 1, 1.1 and 1.2 will cover pretty much any hosting scenario. It's suggested to go up above TLS version 1 to be the most secure, but that is, like I said, it's dependent upon your website. I set my log levels here to verbose. This is not great if you are going outside of a development scenario. If you're going into a production scenario, I would set this something definitely below verbose here. And then you can play around and tweak these settings. I do have an error in my code. We'll go ahead and see that, but that's not the point of this video. This video is to help show you how to set up this web transport layer. So with that, we're going to go here to say build settings, and I've already built a WebGL client, so you'd have to switch platform over here and then it allow you to build. So I've already built the client, and I've actually already built the server, and you notice that I have selected the Linux platform. And if we go ahead and look at this is what it's going to produce. It's going to produce a file structure that looks very, very similar to this. This is what we're going to inject into some of our Dockers. So this is the repository you want to find. And then we're going to go to Docker here, and inside WebGL, I have basically a walkthrough. I'm going to be working through all of this in this video. But basically, the cert setup directory, these are Docker Compose files. So this requires you to have Docker set up on your machine. I do have a video talking about how to set up Docker on Windows. It's a heck of a lot easier to do it on Mac because there's brew, and on Linux because you have some sort of APK or apt-get install package manager. Windows, it's kind of a process, so go ahead and watch that video. But with that Docker setup, it comes with the Docker Compose commands. We're going to be doing this, and I have these numbered from the very first one that you're going to do all the way to the very last one that we're going to do. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go ahead and move this aside, and I'm going to downsize this. And let's go ahead and open up the, I have this opened up in VS Code here, and I have a terminal open. We're going to do docker ps-a. I don't have any Dockers running right now. And so the very first thing when you're setting up a WebGL here is you need to set up a domain name. There are actually a couple of different ways you can set up a domain name. You know, there's like Namecheap or GoDaddy. For this particular video, I'm going to set up a brand new domain name. I'm going to register a new domain name. It's going to be a free one. I'm going to use the website called NoIP. So I'm going to go ahead and sign in there and get one generated. Okay, so here I actually already have a domain that I have set up, but I want to do it from the very beginning. So I'm going to set up a brand new one. So I'm going to go ahead and say just create a new host name. For this particular one, I'm going to call it CyberBullet example. It's going to be an A record here. The reason I want it to be an A record is because I want it to map to my public IP address. So I'm going to go ahead and just grab my public IP address by going to my IP. And I'm going to copy this, come back over to here, and paste it into here, say create hostname. Okay, so we have that hostname set up. Fantastic. We are done here. That's probably the easiest part. So now we got a domain set up. Let's head over here and we are going to do this very first step in here. And what this is going to do is it's going to pull down an Nginx Docker. It's going to map port 80. It has a configuration file here. So if we open this up, I'm going to need to replace this, these DNS names with the DNS name that I just set up. So I'm going to go back over to here, copy it, paste it into here. And then this Let's Encrypt site is just holding an example HTML saying, hey, you know, you got your website working. So the very first thing to do is let's modify these domain names here. Paste it here. Now you need to make sure that when you're setting up your domain name, you need to set up a domain name for www and for any subdomains. So for this particular case, I don't have a www, so I'm not including it here. But this should be good enough to get going. So I'm going to go ahead and cd into the cert setup directory so we can see that here. And the command I'm going to run is called docker compose. And I want to pass in a file. So I'm going to pass in the very first one. And I'm going to say up. There's also corresponding down. And we can pass in -d to run it as a daemon. I'm not going to run it as a daemon. I want to see the output here in my console window. So I am going to go ahead and just go ahead and start this up. Great. So it is running here. So I'm going to open up a incognito window. Just go to localhost and it's on port 80. And we can see that the website is up and it is running. Fantastic. So now let's try to hit it with that domain, and let's paste that domain name, click enter, and you'll notice nothing is happening. I can't get to it. Even though I have that set up here. So what's going on? Well, the reason is I have not port forwarded to my machine. So let's go ahead and have a look at that. I'm going to go to a tool called port forward check tool. It's going to run that here. And if you have the telnet, this is exactly what this is doing. And we can say, hey, I cannot get to this port. And the IP address that I'm putting in here is my public IP address. I think by default, it forces you to use that. But I don't have it in here. So we need to open up our modem and we need to log in there. So I'm going to show you my modem setup. It's not going to be the same for everybody. All right. And I'm going to select the IP address for the machine I'm working on right now. Then I've actually already pre-set up some rules here. What I am allowing is port 80 and port 443 through the firewall. And then I have, not through the firewall, it's going to allow incoming requests on port 80 and 443 to hit this machine. I've also set up a separate rule for port 7778. I'm going to apply both of those. Okay, so as you can see, I have them both applied here. This one here is the 7778. This one is port 80 and 443. Now, if you have a remote server, you don't need to do any of this, but since I'm doing everything local, you'll need to do this. Let's try to hit it again. And as you can see, I still cannot hit it. Well, let's check the port forward. What is going on here? So let's hop back over to here and say port 80, check your port. And as you can see, hey, success, port 80 is open, but I can't hit it for some reason. So why is that? So this will only apply if you're doing this locally. You can never have your own public IP address hit itself. So my local machine is requesting out through my router. My router has a public IP associated with it, and it's saying, hey, request yourself. You can't do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make my request through a VPN. So I'm going to go ahead and just sign in to my VPN here. So I am now signed into my VPN. So now my IP address is actually going to be different. It's going to go out through my modem, to my VPN IP, and my VPN IP is then going to make a request back to my modem's public IP address, and that'll allow me to connect up here. So now we're going to try to go to CyberBulletExample.ddns.net. And as we can see, we can now hit it. So great. So we got a website up. We can hit it publicly. We see the requests coming in the log. So fantastic. So now we need to go on to the next step here, which is we need to actually have Let's Encrypt request these certificates, and it's using certbot. So certbot is going to make all these requests. We need to change this domain name to match here. All right, so this is going to request the staging certificates. It's not going to be production certificates. That's going to be another step. So we're going to go docker compose file, second one up, and again, I'm not going to run it as a daemon here. All right, so successfully received certificates, and the way that this sets it up is that it will map it to my certs here. So we can go to Etsy, Let's Encrypt, Live, and here we have right here. But you see there's no files here. If I actually reveal in File Explorer, you will actually see that there are files here. The reason you can't see them here is VS Code doesn't have permission to see them. Because basically what this is doing is it is symlinking what is actually in your archive here. If we open up the archive, we can see that we have our staging certificates for our example domain here. And you can see I actually have multiple domains. I tried this example out with the CyberBulletGames.ddns.net, and now I'm setting it up again with CyberBulletExample. So that's the staging, but we need to, make sure that everything is working properly. So we're going to run the verify step next. So this one right here it's going to run certbot command again, except this time it's we need to make sure this is right. So example DDNS, and it is oh yes, I missed a step here. No wonder why that didn't make sense. This is what I was looking for. So it is actually just running the certificates. So let's go ahead and see what happens when I do that. So docker compose file, the third step up. And we can see that it says invalid test cert, but this is fine because it actually returned with some domains and certificate names. So it's working. It's verified. But like it says, it's not an actual valid certificate. It's basically just a testing certificate. So now we need to actually set up our production or real certificates. So that's what this is going to do. And as you can see, we're actually going to register an email with this domain. And we're going to agree to the terms of service. And we need to make sure that the domain is set up properly. So with all of that, we're going to do a docker compose file. And actually, I don't want the first one again. Docker compose file 04 up. Okay. So, oh yes. I missed a step. So you see it basically blew up. It was unhappy with me. We need to actually clear out our testing certificates. So I'm going to go ahead and just delete this archive. And I'm going to go to my live keys here, and I'm going to delete that archive. Okay, great. So it successfully got our certificates. These are our now production live ready real certificates that we just got for Let's Encrypt specifically for our domain here. So now the next we need to verify that, and it's just like the other ones, except you'll see this one is not referencing staging. So we're going to do a docker compose file 05 up, and hopefully this should run without issue. Perfect. And it says, hey, you have a correct certificate here. Awesome. So we now actually have valid Let's Encrypt certificates. So let's actually test that out. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to kill our Docker here. And we're going to set up our production Docker. I do actually add an additional step here. This is specifically for Nginx. So if you have an Nginx website, this will help you kind of secure it a little bit more. But I'm going to go ahead and run this. This is basically another cert that it's going to generate. And this, it says it's going to take a long time. It takes about a minute. So just let it sit there. Okay, so it's done. And what that does is it generates this DH param and it puts that parameter here. So with that generated, now the next thing that we're going to do, and if you want to see, it's running an OpenSSL Docker, and it's generating that DH param file there. Pretty straightforward. So now the next thing is we need to generate the PFX certificate. Now the PFX is basically like a bundle of our Let's Encrypt stuff. You'll see it's getting the private key that was generated, it's getting the certificate that was generated, and it's getting the chain that was generating, combining all of those. It's not applying a password. You can put a password on there if you want, and it's outputting it to our cert.pfx directory, which is right here. This normally would be empty. I've generated it already, so I'm going to go actually say delete this. And I guess that's specifically for our website, whatever. Our WebGL cert, we're going to delete this here. And then we need to make sure that our domain is correct. So let's go ahead and say example.dns. Okay, so that's the very last step. So let's do docker compose file last step up. It says unable to load private key. So let's make sure things are correct here. So archive. Oh yeah, it looks like it did that weird thing. So we're gonna go ahead and say 0002. Not sure why it did that, but whatever. We're gonna try it again. And bing bamity boom, exit code 0 is exactly what we want. And we now have our PFX. And you'll notice that this cert here is a JSON file going to this cert.pfx. So this cert.pfx is exactly what you need to run your WebGL based Unity server. So I'm going to do a docker ps here. Great. I don't have anything running. So we are officially done with this cert setup directory. Now time to start setting things up for production. So we have all of our certs mapped in here. And just like the cert setup, I have two different versions here. I'd probably go with website v2 if you're on Windows. Other platforms may work with the v1. The v1 is actually referencing the live directory versus the archive directory. But basically what website is it's just an Nginx website. This is it. It's just an Nginx website. And on that website, I have actually uploaded what I have built previously. So I've moved all of these files into my Unity server directory. I'm going to go ahead and delete this PFX file because I need to copy the PFX that I just generated here. So copy and paste it right there, because this PFX needs to be in my Unity server directory, because when WebGL clients are coming from my server that has the same matching certificate, mind you, it will ask for this cert.pfx file, and that's how it's going to successfully encrypt our traffic. So we're going to go to cd prod setup, and I'm going to set up my website first. So if we go to this website, let's make sure that our domain name here is correct. So we are going to CyberBulletGames example. That's what we want there. And then this production file here, I'm actually going to put these back in here. We'll see if that has some complaints here. But this is the Nginx configuration specifically for our setup here. So I'm going to go ahead and replace this here with CyberBullet example.ddns.net, and I'm going to replace all of those. So now our production setup here will be according to that specifically. And basically what this is going to do is it's going to allow port 80, and Let's Encrypt always puts its temporary ACME challenges files at this path. That's how it knows to register or generate or renew a certificate. So we'll need that if you wanted some sort of automated cron process to run the certbot renew command. I've commented this out, but basically what this will do is, in fact, I'll put that back, is this will redirect us to if this was on the www dot namespace. But I don't have a www dot. I just have this one, so I commented out this entire section. Feel free to put this back in if you want to redirect from port 80 to the www, domain.com, whatever you want to do. Doesn't matter. This isn't super important as this is just the Nginx website. So with that said, I'm going to do a docker compose file, and we are going to website v2 up. And again, I'm not going to run this as a daemon, but I am specifically referencing this Etsy archive. Ooh, and actually that's going to mess up because it's 0002. So let's change that to 0002. Alrighty. And we always want it to map inside. So what this is saying is this is my local file path, and it's going to map inside of my Docker at this path. So just make sure that at least the domain name here matches up. Okay, so with that, let's make sure let's see if I made any mistakes here, first of all. Great. All right, so let's hop back over to here, refresh, and there we go. Production site, it is encrypted, connection is secure, certificate is valid. We see CyberBulletGames details. This should say Let's Encrypt in here somewhere, but we see that this is a valid certificate, so our certificate is working. And the way that I've set up this Docker is I can go to /game, and it should load up my Unity game here. And we'll see if those security headers that I enabled is gonna throw anything off. But with that, let's kind of move that aside. So we have our Nginx server running. We actually now need to run our Unity server. So prod setup. So let's go ahead and downsize this. So this website here, in fact, it doesn't even need this. I probably shouldn't even have this in there. So I'm going to delete that. Basically what that is doing is now on our public website, we could go to cert.json, and it will have a certificate.json file. Oh, looks like it doesn't. That's perfect. Whatever. So with this one, I now have to specify my cert here. And in fact, let's just fix that with my cert file here. And looks like this header on my website may be throwing errors. So I may have to come over here and modify or comment out some of these security headers. We'll get into that later. But we're going to run, let's close all this down. we're going to run our Unity WebGL, which has our script in here, or our Unity server in here. So let's go to Docker compose file Unity. I don't want that one. I want the Unity WebGL server here. Up. Okay, and I mean, like I said, I've got errors in my code. Don't worry about it. The biggest thing is we need to make sure that there's no errors in here. If you see something about, hey, I can't find this file, make sure that your working directory matches up with the directory that you're in here. But things look like they are working there. Our client here looks like it's a little unhappy. So I'm going to try to rebuild it by removing these security headers here. Feel free to fix that up yourself if you want to have a more robust, secure scenario. But for now, I am just going to make sure that this Nginx server is completely taken down and it is refreshed. Okay, so that is refreshed. Let's hard refresh here. Okay, so it is all loaded up, and this looks very, common. So now we are, and I put it on verbose logging here. This is what you would expect to start seeing on the verbose log. So we're going to go to cyberbulletexample.ddns.net. Click join server, and you'll see a whole bunch of errors pop up. Because like I said previously at the start of the video, I have errors in my code, but that's not the point of this. Okay. So now here we are. We are connected up on the server. Fantastic. And if we hop over to the server, we see we see all of those errors it's talking about. But I'm connected up on the server on SSL. So hopefully that helps you. There are some errors that you could come across. One of them being, like I said, if you're testing locally, you need to make sure you have ports open on your server. The WebGL server is going to require whatever you've set up here. Let's hop back over to here. The WebGL server is going to require this port to be open. That is the only requirement for running a web server here. As you can see, I started two completely different servers. One was, and I should have renamed these differently, but this one is the Nginx website. It's completely opposite from my server. And then this is my server, which only requires port 7778 to be mapped here. And we can see that here. And I just have this running on a basic Ubuntu. Feel free to modify this to your needs. The same concept goes if you're running on AWS EC2, if you're running on Bluehost, it doesn't matter. As long as your server is running and you have this port available, and inside of the same place you're executing your Unity server, you have this cert.json file and the cert.pfx that you've generated, you should be able to connect up from your client. And your client, you're going to need to build that WebGL game with specifically client use WSS and SSL enabled, and make sure that this cert.json file matches up to where you have put it into your server. So hopefully that helps you. Covered a lot of material here, but use that. Let's pull this back up here. Use this here to your needs, and be sure to follow this tutorial. Everything I did in here, I talk about in here with all my Docker compose commands that I have used. So hopefully this helps you. Talk to you later. Bye.